So we are well into Season 1 of Star Wars Hunters now, and that means for anyone that is trying to make it to KYBER 1 in ranked, you should be fairly deep into the grind at this point, slowly but surely making your way up the ranks. And today I wanted to go through some of the best tips you guys can implement into your game to help you win more games and therefore rank up faster in Star Wars Hunters ranked mode. Now, before I get into the actual tips, you have to keep in mind that this video is obviously more aimed at the players who either haven't played much ranked or are just struggling to get past maybe the middle ranks, for example. Whenever I do any type of video like this talking about anything to do with ranked in any game, you always get people who are in, for example, in this game, KYBER 1, that'll come into the comments and be like, oh, well, I'm in KYBER 1, so all of the advice you're giving is wrong. You need to keep in mind this video is not aimed for people who are already in KYBER 1. If you're in KYBER 1, what are you doing watching this video? You're literally already the max rank. So you need to keep in mind this video is more aimed at the more like beginner basic tips. Maybe at some point I will do a video that's, you know, how to get from Beskar to KYBER, for example, that is more based on those more advanced tips. But yeah, every time you make content like this, there's always a lot of people that say, oh, this stuff's wrong and I'm better than you. That's not necessarily how it works, especially in Star Wars Hunters. For those who don't know, ranked mode in this game is almost 0% based on actual skill. It is based on playtime. You can have a less than 50% win rate and get to KYBER 1. But without wasting any more time, let's get stuck into the actual tips. Now, the first tip is honestly the most obvious thing, but I think a lot of people honestly do neglect this, and this is simply to just play with your teammates. A lot of people will run around playing as a damage hunter, for example, and just try and get like high kill games and just try and play like that lone wolf type of playstyle. And honestly, that is the #1 way to not move up the ranks, because ranked is based purely on winning and losing. It doesn't matter if you get 100 kills and 0 deaths in a game. If you lose, you've actually lost ranked points. So you need to always sort of keep your teammates in mind. You don't want to be running off on your own. Now, obviously there are certain times when it calls for that. Maybe your teammates are all capturing other objectives, and sometimes it is actually best for you to run off and maybe distract the enemy team. If you see 4 enemies who have all just respawned and your teammates are capping objectives, you can, you know, as Groz, for example, go up and just take a bunch of damage from them. Those enemies are then actually distracted, allowing your teammates to cap objectives. So obviously there are times when that does actually work, but for the most part you want to be sticking with teammates. You always want to be having people around you, because if you're on your own and you run into a 2v1, most of the time you are probably going to lose that. And so it is absolutely crucial that you stick with your teammates. Now, it's not just important to stick, you know, close by to your teammates, you also need to have them in mind too. So don't just focus on yourself. If you're playing as a support hunter, for example, Scorer, who deals really good damage, just because she deals good damage, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be focused on your teammates. She is a support hunter. So focus on your teammates, make sure they're healed as well. That doesn't mean you can't get kills. That doesn't mean you can't, you know, go out and have fun as well, but don't always focus on yourself. Always try and keep your teammates in mind. If you're a support hunter, heal your teammates. If you're a tank hunter like Groz, for example, try and tank a bit of that damage. Jump in front of teammates so they're not getting damaged, and playing with that mindset will definitely help you win more games than not. Now, the next tip I have, which honestly I think is an absolutely crucial tip, is that you guys need to learn a main for every single class in the game. So obviously support, damage, and tank. You need to essentially get a main from each of those classes so that you are actually a versatile player. If you're only good, for example, at playing Diago, and he's just the only hunter you can actually play as, that really does limit you, and it will unfortunately make it a little bit more rigid in terms of the flexibility you have. So if someone takes Diago before you get him, then you're going to be kind of useless because he's the only character that you've really played as. And on top of that, for example, if you are a Scorer main or a Zaina main and someone has already taken a support hunter, sometimes it's better to just not play as the secondary support. Depending on team composition, you might be best just playing as a tank hunter or as a damage hunter, even if your actual main is still available to choose. So I think it is absolutely crucial to get at least one main from each class in the game. And realistically, probably for the damage hunters, just because there's more of them, it's probably best to have 2 damage mains. So for example, Reeve and Diago, so that if you wanted to play as Reeve but someone's taken her, then you can still obviously switch to Diago as well. That is going to help you guys a lot, because team composition is almost the most important thing when it comes to winning and losing games. Now, before we go any further, if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There is plenty more Star Wars Hunters content like this on the way, so make sure you don't miss out. Now, the next tip is kind of a little bit in line with what I just mentioned about learning a main for each class. Don't always just get into a lobby and just instantly pick your favorite hunter. Sometimes it is actually best to kind of wait and see what other hunters your teammates pick. Sometimes you do kind of have to take one for the team, and if, for example, no one has picked a tank hunter, sometimes it is best to just sort of take that bullet and play as the tank hunter, even if that's not necessarily your favorite class. Now, that doesn't mean you necessarily always have to wait. Sometimes if, you know, depending on a map, if it's a map that you just know you always dominate as like scorer, then feel free to pick scorer. I'm not saying you always have to wait, but at least for me, there's a lot of times when I'll load into a map and I'm not too sure who I necessarily want to play as. And so when I'm not 100% set on which hunter I want to play, I'll literally just let everyone else pick, and then I'll look at who they've picked and pretty much choose who is the best hunter for me to choose based on who they have, to kind of be the glue that, you know, glues the team together, rather than if everyone's picked a damage hunter but I want to play as Reeve, then just picking Reeve simply because of that, when at that point we have no support hunters and even no tank hunters either, and that is usually going to result in a pretty big loss for you and your team. So obviously this one is pretty situational. Like I said, it doesn't have to be every single game, but sometimes it is definitely best to wait for others to pick, just to make sure that your team composition isn't completely out of whack. Now, the next tip is another pretty simple one, but this is to focus on the win first and foremost. Don't get greedy. Don't go for like high kill games and stuff like that. At the end of the day, when it comes to ranked, the only thing that matters, literally the single thing that matters, is that you win the game. That is the only thing you need to be doing in order to grind up the ranks. You can literally get 0 kills from Bronzium 3 all the way to KYBER 1. You could literally get 0 kills and still make it all that way, because if you're just supporting your team and you're playing for the win, then you can still do that, even though it probably sounds counterintuitive. Now, again, that does not mean don't go for kills. Obviously, you do still want to be trying to get kills. The more that your enemies are dead, the more time you have to capture objectives and stuff like that. But that doesn't need to be your focus. You just need to make sure that you're getting the win. So depending on the game mode, obviously that sort of changes. And obviously when it comes to squad brawl, that's kind of the exception. That is literally the point of the game, is to get kills. So again, it is a little bit situational, but I see a lot of people who clearly are trying to get like high kill games. And don't get me wrong, that is good fun. But if you want to be doing that, you probably want to do that in casual, because even if you go 10-0, sometimes you can still clearly lose a game because you weren't helping on the objectives, and then at that point you are still losing rank points despite having potentially been the best player in that lobby. So focus on the win. Like I said, that is literally the only thing that matters, especially once you get to the higher ranks as well. Now, last but not least, we've got one that is mostly to do if you're finding yourself having, you know, a little rough patch, you're having a bad game after a bad game. What I would say here is don't force it. Sometimes it can be very easy to get, you know, if you're close to getting to the next rank and you just want to keep pushing until you get there, but maybe you lose 3 games in a row and slowly but surely you're going backwards. In those moments, don't get stuck in a rut. Don't force it. Sometimes it can be best to actually just go, all right, I've had a bit of a rough patch here. Maybe you've tired that day, or there can be a million different things that's going wrong. Sometimes you do just want to take a break and get back to it the next day, because I know for myself, and this has happened already multiple times this season, I'll have a really good run. I'll win like 7 or 8 games in a row, but then I'll get to the point where maybe I've been playing for a while and I'm getting tired, and slowly but surely I'll then lose a game, and then I'll lose a second game and a third game, and all of a sudden I'm actually starting to go backwards in the ranks. And if I just sat there trying to essentially chase my losses, then you are kind of at risk of losing all the progress you just made in those first 7 or 8 wins, and you're gonna have sunk, you know, potentially 3 or 4 hours into the game and literally achieved nothing. So this tip is just to not force it. If you're having a couple bad games in a row, sometimes it is worth just going, you know what, I'm going to get off for today, I'm going to go do something else, and I'm going to come back tomorrow. And you'd be shocked at how many times you do that, and the next day you jump on and play and you're back in, you know, a good groove again, and you get back to your winning ways. So do not force it. That is the first class way to lose all of the progress you have currently made throughout that season. So that's it for a few quick and simple tips for how to progress a little bit faster in ranked. Like I said, guys, if you're already a high rank, I know that some of these tips are either very basic or they may not even apply to you. Keep in mind, I have been in KYBER before. These tips aren't just coming from some random NPC. I do know how to play the game, but like I said, you need to keep in mind that just because, for example, you might be in KYBER 1, that doesn't mean these tips aren't helpful to players who are maybe just starting out in ranked or just haven't played very much. And at the end of the day, weirdly in this game, ranked is based purely on playtime rather than actual skill. It's not like if you're in the top 100, that means you are guaranteed to be in the top 100 players in the world. It essentially means you have played the most amount of playtime compared to every other player. So hopefully these tips help some of you guys out. If they did, be sure to subscribe with those notifications on, as there is plenty more content like this on the way. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and may the force be with you always.